So let's start off by getting a quick overview of the design of what I'm going to be building. So this is the blanket chest assembly. As you can see, this is the whole thing. And really quickly, this is what it's going to look like when it's open. This is probably the better view to give you a quick look around. As you can see, the majority of the construction is going to be a series of panels, frame and panel design, that are joined together at the corners and sitting on a base. The sides are going to be a single panel. The front and back are going to be two panels. And then the top, as you can see, is going to have a couple of sliding dovetail supports. I'm doing this rather than breadboard ends to keep the assembly straight, and potentially could also help me attach my hardware for the lid support. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do there, so there is a chance that I'm going to have to move these in or make them taller or shorter or something, but I'm not quite sure yet. So that's the one area that I don't really have the design cemented in. Underneath the top, there will be a subtop. And one of the things that's hard to see, unless I scroll around to it, is that there is going to be a curve on the front of the top, which is both decorative but also is going to give you a place to pull to lift that lid up. A little bit of a finger hold there. I'm going to be starting this video and this build off on the base. So this is going to be the first thing that I'm going to tackle, and it's not very complicated. As you can see, it's basically a simple construction. 4 legs, 4 inches high each, 4 stretchers, 2 side stretchers, 1 front and 1 back. The stretchers themselves all have a curve cut into the bottom of it that comes up 1 inch from the bottom of the piece. So they're going to be 2 inches tall at the outside and 1.5 inches tall in the center. And that's the same on the side stretchers as well. The 2.5 on the outside and 1.5 in the center. So that's where I'm starting this video off. So let's get down to the shop. What I've got in front of me is all the parts for the base. The stretchers are cut to their final length, as well as their final height on both. But the legs, as you can see, I've only got 2 pieces here, but this represents all 4 legs. I've left the legs basically doubled in length, and I've got all my joinery marked out for both legs that are gonna come out of this. They're short legs, and because they're short, and this is just going underneath the blanket chest, that means that they're a little harder to clamp down for joinery. So by leaving them doubled up, I'm essentially giving myself some more space on these just for clamping service, so that when I go to machine in my mortises, that I don't have any issues. So I've got my mortises marked out. I'm going to be using my horizontal mortiser on these and doing some loose tenons like I've done on a lot of my recent projects. But what I thought I'd do is kind of go through some detail on how to use that. So let me give you a quick rundown on how this mortiser works. So as you can see, my table has a bunch of dovetails cut into it so that I can use these dovetail clamps. And I'm not going to so much be getting into the design of this thing. I'm not going to talk about this, but the basics are, I've got my tabletop here with a center line marked on it, which coincides, of course, with the center line of the bit that I'm using. And the dovetail slots just allow me to clamp things down where I need them. On the side here, I will control the depth of the mortise that I make. And in the front, I've got two movable stops, one on either side of a center pin, that control the lateral movement from one side to the other, so the length of the mortise. And I've gone ahead and made up some different size spacers that give me the different cuts that I want based on the size of the router bit that I've got. So that controls the length or width and the depth of the mortise. So the other adjustment that I need is for the placement on the piece that I'm cutting the mortise into. And basically that is a height adjustment. Left to right, I center it using center lines, and then what I can do is raise and lower the router to different heights. And that's accomplished, again, this is on some linear bearings, through a crank, a couple of stops, and the use of spacers. So on the sides here, on either side, I've got a stop set up that represents the 0 point for that bit, which is the bottom of the bit, just barely touching the bottom of the table. So anything that I raise this up gives me that dimension away from the edge of the piece. In other words, the height off the bottom of the piece that it's going to cut. So I have some of these spacers made up in different sizes, so 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. So in this case, my legs, I'm offsetting the mortises by 1/4 inch to set those rails in 1/4 inch on either side. So that means the total adjustment away from the side is 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is raise this up, drop a spacer in on either side, lower it back down, and then I've got a couple stops at the top that I'll also lock it in. So it'll be locked in from moving up or down, and I don't have to worry about my router moving on me. I'm sure there's a better way to do this to stop it, but I was trying to build this in one weekend, and those are the parts I had on hand, and they work pretty well. So now to use this, I've got my center line of the mortise marked, and I've got the reference edge marked that I need to use. So I'll simply take it, line up that center line with the reference side face down, clamp my piece down, and then I can cut my mortise. So since those are the only 8/4 pieces I'm going to be mortising, everything else is going to be 3/4 milled. Those were 1.5 milled. But I'm going to now set it for the rest of the pieces. And again, this is just a matter of changing out the spacers that I use from 1/2 inch spacers to 1/4 inch spacers. And then locking them in place again. So to cut the mortises and basically everything else, I've got the height set again, And I've got my mortises once again marked out, just the center lines of them, at the same distance from the top edge is on my legs. So that'll be centered in for my 1-inch mortise there. And what I'm doing is I'm lining that up again with my center mark. I've oriented my clamps in the other direction. That's why the crisscross pattern here. And I'm also going to use a speed square here just to make sure that I've got this stretcher square to that router bit. Basically is a quick fence. I can lock this in, and I sometimes will, just putting another clamp down here. But because this isn't centered top to bottom, but rather set a specific distance from my top edge, as I flip this around, it'll be the opposite way. So it's just quicker to just kind of hold that in place, square this up, and I'll be able to run through these cuts just as quickly. And there you have it, 2 mortises cut. So my stretchers on the base are all getting a curve, as are several components on the blanket chest itself. So on these ones, I'm not going to use any kind of template to route them out or anything. There's only 4 pieces, 2 of each. So I'm just going to lay them out on these, cut them, and then clean it up. To do that, I'm going to start off by marking this center point on each one. Okay, and I'll use that for making sure that's the high point of my curve on this, my arch. I was playing around with this a little bit, and I think coming up 3/4 of an inch at the high spot is going to look the best. So I'm going to mark that out on each of them. Then I'm going to take my drawing bow, and I've got my center also marked out on that. I'm going to mark the underside here. For my side stretchers, I need to tighten it up a little bit. I'm going the same height, but that's not the same curve. It's going to be a little bit stronger of a curve to do it to make that same height over a shorter distance. All right, there we have it. Okay, so here's how it turned out. Here's my base. This is going to be the front of the blanket chest and the front two legs. And back here are the rear two legs, obviously. Pretty happy with how the curve came out all the way around and how that looks. I think once the blanket chest is on here, that'll look pretty good. So I've got literally a good base to work on now. So the next step is going to be to move on to all of the sides for the blanket chest, and I've got all the material for that here. One of the reasons I'm doing multiple videos on this project is because that's how I'm having to work on it a little bit at a time. My day job has been crazy lately. I've been traveling a bunch and I haven't been home much, so I haven't gotten any of the normal nighttime work that I get done on this. So I actually milled all of this out at the same time that I milled out the material for the base, and I've had it just kind of separated out over here, ready to go and sitting off to the sides. So in the next video, I'm going to get to making all of the sides for the case, or at least starting on all the sides for the case, getting all the rails and stiles and all that made up. I'm not really sure exactly how far I'll get on it. I guess I'll find out when I get into it, but this is going to be a multi-part video series, so however far I get, I guess this is how far I get. So thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.